Tonight, a dire strait. We're off to the Persian Gulf and a waterway known as Hormuz.
With the rhetoric that's out there, it's safe to say the area is pressurized more than normal.
The United States sends a major show of force to keep the strait open and the oil flowing. Also, Bahrain, a major U.S. military hub in the Persian Gulf, is awash in unrest.
They saw something happening in Tunisia, they saw something happening in Egypt, and they thought, no, it's our turn.
And close quarters. Nearly 20% of the sailors on this aircraft carrier are now women. Watch where you walk.
The blue signs will clearly state it's a male berthing. They'll knock 3 times. Announce, female on deck.
We'll bring you the news tonight on Dan Rather Reports. Good evening from the flight deck of the mighty aircraft carrier, the USS Carl Vinson. We're in the Persian Gulf, headed to the Strait of Hormuz. Tonight, why this narrow strip of water is becoming more dangerous by the day. You can't see it from here, but out there just over the horizon is Iran, with a bellicose and belligerent regime armed to the teeth. And just a few miles off Iran's shore, America's Fifth Fleet. The Navy is increasing its presence in the Persian Gulf as tensions between Tehran and Washington escalate, and there is reason for concern. Iran may not yet have nukes, but it does have enough military power to be a clear and present danger to the United States. These videos are from state television in Tehran, propaganda for local consumption. But the images also telegraph to defense analysts a growing threat. High-speed attack boats, mines, and missiles. Lots of missiles. Earlier this year, the Iranians showed off a new anti-ship cruise missile that can be launched from a truck. Range is reportedly 125 miles. They call it the most accurate missile in the Iranian Navy. And there are many others. Enough weapons to potentially inflict a mighty blow to America's fighting ships, especially in the narrow Strait of Hormuz. The strait lies at the eastern end of the Persian Gulf, a tiny funnel where every year thousands of ships carrying 20% of the world's oil supply transit. At its narrowest point in the knuckle of the strait, the sea lanes are only 2 miles wide, which may sound like a lot, unless you're driving one of these. This is the USS Carl Vinson. At more than 1,000 feet long, the supercarrier has been sent here to deliver a message.
Absolutely not looking for trouble. Here in peace to contribute to keeping this area as a safe, stable, and secure region.
Admiral Thomas Shannon is the commander of this Navy strike group. He oversees the action from the bridge high above the flight deck. Well, everybody reads the newspapers and know that tensions are up between Israel, Iran, and to some extent the United States. Has that made any difference in the way you operate, what you do?
It has, in that with the rhetoric that's out there, it's safe to say the area is pressurized more than normal. So we stand a very alert watch out here to keep an eye on activity around us.
And there is always a lot of activity.
Big inbound merchant ship there.
Another big inbound.
The Navy invited this reporter along as the Vinson passed through the Strait of Hormuz out to the Arabian Sea. The strait is an unremarkable stretch of water, only about 150 miles long, But what happens here, or what doesn't, directly impacts the price you pay at the pump. When oil tankers can't safely navigate the strait, the price per barrel jumps. If the strait is blocked by Iran, estimates are that crude oil prices worldwide could quadruple. The Vinson is here to make sure that doesn't happen. It is officially a routine voyage that, in this political climate, is anything but routine. It begins just after daybreak, guarded by a destroyer in the rear and a missile cruiser up front. The Vinson sets sail for the strait, and the commanders know the Iranians will be watching.
I would expect we'll see some Iranian maritime patrol activity today. They fly regular routine patterns out here, paying attention to what's going on with the Gulf. So we will likely see them today, taking a look at us to see what we're up to.
And keeping an eye on everything that moves. It's 7 a.m., and the Admiral's Bridge is abuzz with activity. Radar screens show everything on the water. A Predator drone flying near the coast is sending a live video feed of the nearby Iranian coastline. Sailors are searching and cataloging every vessel they encounter. Commander Ed Podinsky is the Carrier Strike Group's intelligence officer. Everybody up here is calm, cool, collected, but on alert, right? Yes, sir.
Vigilant, absolutely.
Vigilant. What concerns you most today?
Miscalculation by one side or the other, but I think it's not going to be on our side.
At 9:30, the ship goes full bore. All 9 gun stations around the ship are loaded and manned. But these small guns aren't the only defense. One of our escort ships, the USS Bunker Hill, has an advanced missile defense system. By 10 a.m., the carrier has entered the strait, passing their first area of concern, the small Iranian-owned island of Abu Musa.
This is Abu Musa Island, and so
How big is it? Is it a mile across?
it's a small island. I mean, it's really just military occupation at this point.
Sitting at the entrance to the strait, Abu Musa is only about 3 miles wide, and as these satellite images show, on one corner of the island is a small port, and docked in the port are high-speed attack boats. These fast attack craft, as they're known, can speed along in excess of 50 miles per hour and be armed with machine guns or missile launchers. All right, let me put a hypothetical, Ken. If somebody fires a missile, either from a missile-carrying vessel or from land, you'd pick that up right away, would you?
I've been instructed not to answer hypotheticals, sir.
I understand.
But yes, any contingency we train for, I think we're prepared for. We're not expecting to have to execute those today, but should we have to, I'm confident, and I think the Admiral is as well.
The boats have shadowed the U.S. Navy before. These pictures were taken in January from the USS New Orleans as it passed through the strait. When the small boats are in small numbers, the carriers can easily defend against them. But the concern is, what happens if hundreds of these vessels swarm a U.S. ship? And there are many more boats. As these images from space show, there are bases with attack boats up and down the Iranian coast. If you see one of those approaching, what do you do?
Keep an eye on her. We have various means to communicate with that craft and try to determine their intent.
And to add an extra set of eyes and to make sure there are no surprises, Admiral Shannon has a fleet of Seahawk helicopters that fly low and patrol all around the carrier, checking out every boat. The Seahawks are armed with machine guns and torpedoes.
I put 2 up at dawn this morning to get out ahead of us, take a look, increase our situational awareness, see what's out there this morning.
But on this day, Admiral Shannon and his team may have caught a break. The wind is up and the seas are rough.
On a day like today, as you can see, we have maybe 3 or 4 foot seas with a lot of white caps. That plays to our favor because it keeps a lot of the smaller a fast attack craft or fast inshore attack craft home, because they don't like to come out here and bounce around in this chop. So advantage us for that.
As we near the strait, 2 hours into the mission, first contact with the Iranians doesn't come from the sea, but from the skies. So you have a little update, do you?
Yes, sir. So we are on the western side of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, USS Bunker Hill, our Aegis cruiser asset, has detected what they believe to be, at this point, an Iranian UAV, or unmanned aerial vehicle. They're normally flown out of Qeshm Island. We normally see these.
Unmanned aerial vehicle, is that like a Predator?
This is unmanned. It's similar to the Predator, but unarmed.
And even though the aircraft was too high in the morning haze to see with the naked eye, sailors with long-range lenses on board the carrier did spot and photograph the reconnaissance plane. Back on the bridge, the Iranians are also calling the ship repeatedly on the radio, asking the Benson's intentions. And then another Iranian patrol plane is spotted on radar. This one flying low, directly at the carrier. The Admiral has seen it before.
So we're here, and as you can see ahead of us to our southeast is an Iranian P-3. We've been tracking him for quite a while now. He's been on a very routine, non-provocative maritime patrol.
Minutes later, the plane passes without incident. Iran's military was mostly out of sight for our passage, but for the crew, it's never out of mind. And that's because of terrorism. Every craft on the water has to be suspect, and the Persian Gulf is chock full of small boats, like this dhow that caught Commander Prudensky's attention when it darted in front of the Vinson.
These vessels typically move from point A to point B. If somebody loiters for some reason, we have to find out if they're a fisherman or not. And there's a lot of fishing dhows out here as well. So the opportunity is there for somebody to take a look at us. Certainly the dhow operators, I think, are interested to see an aircraft carrier go by and take pictures of us. But reporting back to some other agency or somewhere else gives us a little bit of pause.
But what the Pentagon is most concerned about is mines. In Washington, the Navy has just announced 4 more minesweepers will be dispatched to the U.S. port in Bahrain to join 4 already stationed there. And finally, there's this. According to press reports, the U.S. military recently conducted a simulated war game in which Israel attacked Iran. And the war planners in Washington concluded there was a good chance that if that happened, the United States would become involved in a regional conflict, and that hundreds of Americans could be lost at sea from an Iranian missile attack on a ship like the Carl Vinson. When you're in your quarters at night, do you think at all about, wow, if tensions begin to rise and there's actually a conflict, it's unrealistic to think that some U.S. ship isn't going to be hit or some U.S. aircraft down?
You know, we maintain a pretty darn good edge on training. We exercise extensively. So, you know, could somebody take a cheap shot at us in the middle of the night? Sure. Are we ready to defend against that? Absolutely.
By 1 in the afternoon, the Carl Vinson is through the strait. A 4-hour maneuver that, if nothing else, proved a point. The Navy would sail anywhere it wants, despite threats from Iran. By late in the day, the carrier's crew returns to their primary duty, air cover for troops on the ground in Afghanistan. But down below, it was another story. General quarters, battle stations for the rest of the crew, an exercise they are practicing more often now. The drill this night is for a torpedo attack. Meanwhile, the strait remained open and passable for all the cargo and the 17 million barrels of oil that passes through these waters every day. Ironically, almost all of it is bound for Asia. Little is shipped to the United States. Coming up next, oil and politics. The incredible story of what's really going on in Bahrain. It has long been an ally of the United States, but now there's trouble in the kingdom. Welcome to Bahrain, a tiny island kingdom in the Persian Gulf just off the coast of Saudi Arabia. Bahrain has only 600,000 citizens, the majority of whom are Shia Muslims, although it is ruled by the Al Khalifa royal family, who are Sunni. At first glance, it is a rich, cosmopolitan, and Western place, teeming with oil money, upscale boutiques,
we do wear, if we go to work, all this.
and U.S. sailors in town for some R&R.
Yeah.
The United States Navy has been here for 60 years. Bahrain has long provided a safe harbor from which to stage the Fifth Fleet's vast operations, a friendly foothold where the U.S. can keep an eye on Iran. But while the Fifth Fleet and the world are on high alert in the Persian Gulf, few people are paying attention to what's happening back in Bahrain. The Arab Spring has come to these shores too. But compared to what's happened in Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya, the uprising has gotten little attention. The government has been denying visas to Western journalists, and now we know why.
المفروض يطلعوا من صدماتهم ما ادري ليش ما ادري عادة كذي. It's illegal to talk on the telephone.
Okay.
My name is Muhammad. I'm a Bahraini. I used to be an IT officer. Now I'm working as an activist, helping people.
26-year-old Mohammed has a master's degree and comes from a family with means. He quit his job as a software engineer a year ago, but still wears a suit, now fighting for what he says are basic human rights.
We're going to Bani Jamra. There's a protest there, just like every other night. I hope we arrive there before the police.
A few miles away from the postcard perfect capital, we were driven to a place the government did not want us to see, where under the cover of darkness, Bahrainis take to the streets nearly every night.
The mainstream media has overlooked Bahrain. There are huge marches where tens of thousands in a small country go out to protest. But there's not even a piece of news of it on the TV.
We thought it was strange to be driven to a street protest in a Mercedes. But in Bahrain, it's not just the most downtrodden who have taken to the streets.
I've seen doctors, I've seen lawyers, I've seen engineers, people who usually never go out publicly stating anything that might endanger their positions.
Tonight, Bahrainis are marching to honor a young man, Fidel Mirza, who died after being injured at a demonstration. The crowd is also remembering a human rights lawyer who's been imprisoned by the government for nearly a year.
Once you reach the point where you demand being a part of the political process in Bahrain, you will be targeted, you will be deemed as a traitor, you will be deemed as someone who have no loyalty for Bahrain.
Bahrain is ruled by King Hamad al Khalifa, known locally as King Hamad. But the real power is held by the king's uncle, the prime minister, who has ruled for 40 years. The Khalifa family has reigned since the 18th century, and Khalifas, along with other Sunni loyalists, hold all the top jobs in the ministries, the judiciary, and the military.
There has been something like an apartheid in Bahrain. I remember even on my university days in the 90s, the first time I went to the university to get some information about the University of Bahrain, I was stopped at the gate because I was wearing black, the color that Shia usually wear in their religious ceremonies. So when he saw me and he read my name, so the area I was from, he told me to go back. You're not allowed to get in wearing a black shirt.
The signs are everywhere that the Shia are no longer accepting what they see as the status quo.
بيجونهم الحين الشرطة لا؟
Is that common for the police not to respond?
Not really. Usually they come in faster than we could arrive.
The uprising had a dramatic and violent beginning a little more than a year ago, on February 14th, 2011, captured for the world by the protesters themselves. It was the 10th anniversary of promises made by King Hamad for sweeping political reforms. Promises many Bahrainis say were not kept. Bahrainis took to the streets in record numbers, but it was a peaceful movement.
I saw children playing around, women smoking hubble bubble, the Arabic hubble bubble. I saw young Bahrainis chanting, anti-government slogans.
Reem Khalifa is a Bahraini journalist who was on the ground during the pivotal moments of February 2011. Riding the wave of the Arab Spring in Tunisia and Egypt, the protest was something new for Bahrainis.
It is not like Iraq or Lebanon. It is Bahrain. We are, the least among Arab nations when it comes to bloodshed, We're very peaceful, cosmopolitan society.
In retrospect, the demands were modest. The people were asking that all members of parliament be elected, not appointed, and they wanted freedom of the press and an independent judiciary.
Women were very much motivated as well, and young Bahrainis, Sunni and Shia, were together. At the beginning it was like, they were all carrying the Bahraini flags, red and white, and they looked very much peaceful.
They saw something happening in Tunisia, they saw something happening in Egypt, and they thought, no, it's our turn.
Okay.
Reem's husband, Mansour al-Jamri, is the editor of Bahrain's only independent and non-sectarian source of news, Al-Wasat.
اليوم جلسة محاكمة مع المعلمين. وطلع حكم على 7 بالسجن.
Mansour returned from exile in the UK in 2001, invited back by the king himself, who was interested at that time in allowing freedom of the press as part of a package of reforms.
Political prisoners were freed, political exiles were allowed to return back. So we had a honeymoon period at that time. Everybody was so happy, and we started a very good period for reforms. Unfortunately, as the years later on, we found that reversals were being introduced to the promises, and therefore it hit hard when the crackdown started in 2011.
The government response from the very beginning was harsh and swift.
And the first person was killed, and then a second person was killed. And when 2 people died on that day, then the situation changed.
Officials shot tear gas and stun grenades into the crowds. Two men were dead, but according to Mansour, people kept coming to the streets. They felt they had nothing left to lose.
The distribution of the wealth is quite in an unimaginable way between those who have everything and those who have nothing. And people got fed up and they don't have a say. They have no equal status before the law. And I think all this has combined together, basically. Lack of democracy, too much corruption and discrimination.
A park called the Pearl Roundabout became the heart of the protest. Despite the violence of previous days, it became a focal point for round-the-clock peaceful occupation. It was a festive mood. Thousands camped out. Coffee and tea were passed around. On day 3, the king went on state TV to express his condolences for the deaths. At dawn, however, the roundabout would come to be known as the site of the, quote, massacre.
People calling for help, people spotting people bleeding in the street. One of my colleagues, she witnessed a killing happening in front of her face, and she paid for that. She was tortured and detained.
A journalist.
She's a journalist, and this happened in a country who believes that we have traditions. These traditions shouldn't really touch a woman, according to the Arabs and the tribes' traditions. But in reality, it was not happening. Women were touched, tortured, detained, killed.
4 more were killed that night. 2 of them were elderly, over 60, and 2 of them were youths in their 20s. 3 of them are from my island, Sitra. One of them was my colleague in the university.
Hundreds were injured, many by shotgun fire. But the government blocked access to the main hospital, denying aid to blooded protesters. Those doctors and nurses who did help the protesters were arrested. Having witnessed the bloodshed all day, Reem then went to a press conference that night of the Gulf region's leaders. Exhausted and indignant, she confronted Bahrain's foreign minister.
ما حدث في ميدان اللؤلؤ مجزرة يا سعادة الوزير. اسمح لي وأقولها الآن أمام الإعلام البحريني والأجنبي ولا أريد أن أحرج أحدا. ما رأيته لا يمكن. ما يحدث في مستشفى السلمانية لا يمكن.
It was a risky thing to do.
Start receiving death threats all the time. My family were targeted. I mean, not because of me, but also it happened to me that members of my family, they're doctors. My sister was detained, arrested. My brother-in-law, he was detained and tortured and arrested. And we're talking about professional, upper middle class in society. A surgeon, he's a vascular surgeon.
Still, the people wouldn't stop walking. The Bahrain Defense Force fired on these protesters without warning, killing one man.
An event like that in Bahrain, which is a small island, has a big significance. We're all connected in Bahrain. everybody is even less than 6 degrees apart. You're either his cousin, or you went to a school with him, or he's a friend. So people were traumatized.
4 days later, more than 150,000 Bahrainis took to the streets. Under threat like never before, by mid-March, the Khalifas brought in Saudi troops and tanks. The Saudis are Sunni, and put the country under martial law. 4,000 people were rounded up. Mansour says he had attempted to calm the situation by acting as an intermediary between the government and the protesters. But soon, his newspaper, too, became a target.
Our printing press was attacked and damaged to basically make it impossible for us to print. Besieged by 500 so-called vigilantes. Our photographers got beaten. Some of our journalists were arrested. Distributors were beaten, those who distribute our newspaper.
أهلا بكم من جديد مشاهدينا في الراصد ودعوني أرحب.
Following on from there, the Bahrain television started a program whereby every night they will bring certain groups to be tried on air. So for one night would be for the professors of the university. They will name them and they will ask for phone calls from anybody who knows about certain groups, basically the Shia people, and target them. So next day the professors will disappear from work or will be detained. A night for the athletes, and another night for the teachers, another night for the doctors.
And then one evening, for more than 3 hours, it was the newspaper Al-Wasat's turn.
طبعا أعزائنا، من المؤسف جدا أن تقوم صحيفة من المفترض أن تنقل الحقيقة بتزييف الحقيقة والاستخفاف بالرأي العام لتمرير تلك الأكاذيب. طبعا احنا أيضا الطموح للأطر.
It's all stage managed. They brought all ththese people who are anti-democracy people to talk about Al-Wasat and must be shut down, must be punished.
The next day, one of the paper's board members went missing.
I telephoned the board member, Mr. Karim Fakhrawi, and said to him, we are holding an emergency meeting because of what happened last night. Mr. Karim Fakhrawi told me, I cannot attend because I was about to switch off my phone as I am entering to the investigating officer at the police station. After that telephone call, he disappeared.
That was the last time anyone spoke to board member Karim Fakhrawi. 9 days later, his tortured body was delivered to his family.
And there were so many other horrific stories. They did so much to us without nobody's accountable. Nobody has ordered any investigation on what happened.
Mansour and several colleagues were forced to resign. And for the next 4 months, the newspaper was taken over by the government. When our program returns, the Obama administration, torn between a strategic ally and the democratic yearnings of a repressed population. That's next.
Bahrain is a long-standing partner, and we are committed to its security. We recognize that Iran has tried to take advantage of the turmoil there, and that the Bahraini government has a legitimate interest in the rule of law. Nevertheless, we have insisted both publicly and privately that mass arrests and brute force are at odds with the universal rights of Bahrain's citizens.
Every day, Gas in my home. Why this?
Bahraini activists welcomed President Obama's comments last May, some of the few he has made about the country. They insist, however, that Shiite Iran has played no role in their uprising. Today, Al-Wasat is back in production and martial law has been lifted. But with more than 70 Bahrainis killed since last February and hundreds still in jail, many people feel that there's been little to no accountability, and they wonder, where is the United States? Whose side are the Americans on?
Have a drink.
Thank you. No problem. Thank you.
Sir,
Sir, why do you help us?
ليش تساعدهم؟
ساعد ما هي طبيعتنا احنا.
It's in their nature. It's in their nature. That's their tradition.
But there could be danger helping the press.
يقول لك بس يمكن يعدونك لو شافوك تساعد.
لا ليش نساعد ناس جايين في خدمة الشعب. زين ومو جايين مسوين أي شيء يعني.
To activists like Mohammed, the answer to where U.S. loyalty lies is obvious. The United States considers Bahrain a major non-NATO ally, an official designation that entitles Bahrain to buy military weapons from the U.S., such as helicopters, armored personnel carriers, and tear gas.
They have a full bag from all kind of these. Yeah, this is non-lethal technologies. Most of the ammo we found in Bahrain are imported from this company, which is in Pennsylvania, I think. Yes, Pennsylvania, USA.
Tear gas is supposed to be non-lethal, but authorities are shooting canisters at close range, hitting protesters on the head, and also, this man claims, launching them into homes.
He covered the windows with these wire to keep tear gas canisters from breaking the windows and getting inside.
هذا احنا نسمعهم والجماعه يعني جيران تسمعهم يقول له قط في البيت هذا زياده هم من البيت يعني كلهم الحين الرجال كلهم يخافون.
People who were suffocated and died due to tear gas will always remember that the tear gas canister that killed their father or grandfather is made in the United States.
In response to pressure from the U.S. Congress, the State Department last October put on hold a planned sale of $53 million worth of military equipment to Bahrain, including tear gas. But Mansour believes the United States isn't pushing hard enough, lest it jeopardize an important military alliance in the Gulf right when it needs it.
I think the issue of the flow of oil, stability of the Strait of Hormuz, is the predominant concern for the United States, for the military, for the Pentagon, the policymakers. There's oil that must flow. Everything else is details and has to be, dealt with at a lower level.
And that's where the United States' democratic ideals collide with the cold, hard reality of oil-driven politics. In the short term, as tensions escalate in the Gulf, the United States is desperate for a safe place to base its naval might. And though the United States may want to keep a lid on things, Bahrainis aren't backing down. Just 2 weeks ago, an estimated 100,000 Bahrainis, the men on one side, the women on the other, marched down a 4-lane highway. Still mostly peaceful.
صمود يسقط حمد يسقط حمد down حمد يسقط حمد down خليفة.
Without meaningful reform, however, and quickly, Bahrain's opposition is becoming more violent and less interested in dialogue. And that could undermine the U.S. interest as well, particularly if restive Bahrainis are driven into the arms of Shia-dominated Iran.
العالم كله يطالب البحرين بفتح الحوار مع
بتكات النظام ويتحاكمون هذول على القتله يقتلون ناس ابرياء في بيوتهم.
الحوار بالنسبه
حوار يعني البحرين
حوار بين الناس وبين
الحكومة.
الحكومة.
الحكومة ما نشتغل فيها، الحكومة ما نبيها، لا نبي حمد ولا خليفة، لازم يتحاكمون. عم بيلاش أمريكا يحاكمهم، حقوق الإنسان بأمريكا وكلام كذا. الوضع بهالوضع هذا اللي في البحرين مو شيء بسيط، هذين بشر هذه حاجة.
For now, King Hamad and the ruling party maintain that reforms are underway and that the doors to dialogue remain open. To this day, however, no official has been held accountable for the killings and the beatings, while 20 doctors await trial for their role in tending to the wounded.
She's dismissed from her work. هاي عنصرية? Yeah, this is discrimination, she said. I asked her. They're mad that they are ignored. It's not a matter of housing project, job. It's just being, a human being. They want to be treated like a human being. Dignity with dignity and pride.
It's a deadlocked situation. How long could we survive it? I don't know. We need an exit. We need a political solution. At the moment, I can't see a plan for a political solution. All what I see is entrenchment. Those who conducted the crackdown, they are declaring that they are there and they will come back. They use a Quranic motto, وَإِنْ عُدْتُمْ عُدْنَا. If you return to opposition, we will return to crackdown, basically.
Today is the final funeral service for Fadel Mirza, that young man honored in the night march who died after being injured in a protest. Eyewitnesses say he was hit in the head with a tear gas can. After the service, Reem tells us, the mourners expect a confrontation.
No problem, no problem. Go and go. يلا go, ها؟ ابغى الشيء اتصل لك معك.
مستلزمات الريحة؟
لا مو مستلزمات الريحة، بس تتأمنوا لأن يعني لا حد يدش هنا كلش. سبحان الله عليك. لا يمكن يفتحون الباب الصبيان وتبقى يوم إلا ما حد يجي البيت. الريحة تصيدكم. ما يبين.
Don't worry. Everything will be good. What to do? You should defend about yourself.
The clashes will continue late into the evening.
Is it safe for you to speak openly like this?
I don't care anymore. My friends have been in prison. Some of them are still in prison. Some of them are in hiding, and some of them are dead. I think by now, if anything would have happened, I would have accepted it. I have no choice but to accept what will happen. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have your dignity, the rest of things don't really matter that much.
It was President Theodore Roosevelt who said, "A good navy is not a provocation to war, it is the surest guarantee of peace." Teddy Roosevelt made those remarks in an address to Congress in 1902. Now, more than a century later, America's defense relies more than ever on the thousands of men and women of the U.S. Navy. This reporter had the honor of spending some time with the crew of the aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson. You really understand the enormity of this ship when you see it from the air. More than 3 football fields long, the nuclear-powered carrier could sail for 20 to 25 years without refueling. But thankfully for the crew, they're only deployed for 6 months at a time. On this trip, the Admiral has chosen 2 escort ships that carry defensive systems to protect the carrier. That's the USS Bunker Hill and the USS Sterett. While there are a select few who fly the helicopters and high-performance jet fighters, there are hundreds more who keep them flying, tirelessly working around the clock. I was privileged to sit down with a few of them during their dinner break.
Well, pretty experienced crew here. Well, have all these headlines about Iran made much difference in what you do here on the ship?
Just business as usual, you know. A lot of us are out here we enjoy our jobs, and, you know, whatever the nation calls us to do, you know, then we're here, you know, to respond at any time, you know.
Have you noticed, is the ship more alert than it generally is?
We're constantly on the alert. We've always got flights in the air or planes in the air keeping an eye on us. So whenever we're in this area, we definitely, you can feel a little more tension on the ship, just because we're doing operations.
This reminds us why we are in the Navy to begin with, you know, what the Navy is for, the mission. So it pretty much heightens our alertness, and we're always looking out for our shipmates, you know, and it's pretty much like a wake-up call, you know, training, and, you know, it's real, it can get real.
Well, when you ride home, do you talk about the situation with Iran and ship being tense?
I don't. I tend to leave that stuff out. I just kind of put in the positive stuff of what I'm doing every day and what's been going on with myself and how things are going back home.
Home for the ship is San Diego, California. It will be several months before these sailors get to see their families again.
Sir, this is how our enlisted sailors live.
Command Master Chief Jeffrey Pickering is the highest-ranked enlisted man on the Vinson, a carrier whose ranks now include more than 15% women. The sleeping quarters are divided by gender. There's only so much space, and privacy is, well, limited.
The blue signs will clearly state it's a male berthing. They'll knock 3 times, announce, female on deck. Wait 10 seconds, just like it states, and after 10 seconds, he'll say, come on in, and she'll go out and do her stuff. Now, if it was a female berthing, they'll do the opposite, male on deck, so the ladies will have a chance to get private.
And the purpose of that is if you have to go through to doing your work.
Yes, sir. As you see, they're stacked 3 high.
The Vinson is a 24-hour-a-day operation, a floating city of more than 5,000, with sleeping berths in every available space.
You can find sailors sleeping anywhere about the decks on this ship. There's another sailor sleeping below our feet right now, so please don't make too much noise. There's sailors above, 03 level, even in the island structure. We have the captain and others that sleep in that section of the ship. Sailors everywhere.
And the quarters are tight. 3 small bunks high, a curtain for privacy or sleep, and pretty much what you see is what you get. Specialist Stephen Hale.
Now, when you first came aboard the ship, did you say to yourself, there's no way I can make it for 6 months in this small a space?
Absolutely. I brought 3 sea bags worth of clothes whenever I came, and I immediately sent 2 of those sea bags home, just didn't need it. But over the years, I've actually learned how to put more stuff in if I fold everything neatly and tight.
It's pretty close quarters for 6 people.
It is. When everybody gets out, it's a tough spot. There's a lot of squeezing and moving, but we make it work. You know, we're out to sea for 6 months sometimes, and you got to make the best out of your situations, and we get used to it. We learn to adapt. That's what sailors are good at.
The ship was commissioned 30 years ago this month, and with an everyday scrubbing, the Vinson is kept in ship shape.
Now, you showed me around today. If I come back tomorrow or next week, Will it be as clean then as it was
Yes,
today?
sir. Every morning. Cleaning stations. That's what we do every morning.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you very much.
Thank
we
you, sir.
appreciate what you do. The brave and steady men and women of the carrier called Benson and its accompanying warships, doing their job, making their sacrifices, paying the price in a time of war, and amid talk of new war, lest we forget. That's our program for tonight. Our thanks to everyone in the Navy, especially those aboard the carrier called Benson, for all their help in making this broadcast possible. For HDNet, from the carrier called Benson in the Arabian Gulf, Dan Rather reporting. Good night.
If you would like to add your name to an email list for information on upcoming programs, or if you would just like to send a question or comment, please email us at viewer@hd.net.